welcome to our webinar for today. Okay, can everyone see my screen all right? So today we will be talking about how to master reading comprehension for the SAT, best practices. And today we have our new Harmony Plus colleague with us. His name is Mr. Luckman N, and I am your host, Ms. Calavi. So a lot of you guys are our regular webinar attendees, but just a little refresher about who we are. Okay, so Harmony Plus is an international learning ecosystem based in Silicon Valley that seeks to upgrade education. So through a hybrid learning model that leverages both in-person and online resources, we aim to equip students with the skills they need to adapt and excel in a highly competitive professional climate. So we do this with our hybrid learning platform. So we provide education as well as services. We have both online and offline resources. We have synchronous class sessions and meetings, as well as asynchronous services and education assignments for students. We combine theory and practice and guidance from top teachers from leading universities so that we can help students build a competitive advantage and enjoy continuous improvement. So just a handful of universities where Harmony Plus students have been admitted. So basically a lot of the top ones. And now let me introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Luckman N. So he has over a decade of experience in education with big names such as the Princeton Review and C2. So he did teach SAT classes for the Princeton Review and actually helped develop the curriculum for that. He also has a proven track record specifically in the SAT, and he helps students from some of the most competitive areas across Silicon Valley get really high SAT scores. So we're talking about students in Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Saratoga, Mountain View, Los Altos, San Jose, and more. So many areas within Silicon Valley, many competitive places. But the most relevant thing of all, he received a perfect SAT verbal score and a perfect score on the essay section when it existed. And he did that on the first try. So he wants to let you guys know that he received a perfect score and you can too. And he will tell you how to do that in today's webinar. And then I'm your host today. So I am the Harmony Plus Chief of Staff and also an education consultant. I'll be here to help field questions at the end. But without further ado, Luckman, would you like to take it away?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Again, as Cole introduced me, you know, everything has a purpose. My main purpose I can present to you is to get your child a perfect on SAT verbal, which I was able to do in one try. And I did it through no mystery, but through some proven techniques and frankly, through a lot of practice. I took hundreds of practice tests. But in my agenda for today, first, I wanted to talk about context, its importance, and how to practice it. Frankly, a lot of people focus on vocabulary and verbiage a lot, but you can actually not necessarily have the best English vocabulary. You should to come in fully prepared to the test, but you can make up for this through understanding of context and through just understanding some of kind of the format of the passages and what you should be looking for. There's a lot of commonality between the themes. So yeah, context is very important. If you don't know what a word means, you can figure it out from the words surrounding it. And seeing as how it's all reading passages, this is very important. Every section is timed to 65 minutes. So we're going to talk about timing strategies. As we had went over, I have worked with students that had perfect in other sections, but really just couldn't master the verbal. And you know, they had a lot of problems staying within the 65 minutes, etc. There's a few different strategies at hitting the test that I'm going to go through. Then very, very, very important, SAT verbal trickery, how the test makers try to trick you. They do this through some very common methodologies that don't alternate that much. So if you can understand the 4 types of answers that they're going to give you and why, just exactly the type of tricks they're trying to use, I mean, that's invaluable information in your quest to become proficient at the verbal section of the SAT. Then we're going to go over some passage reading strategies, a very common thing I see when students first come to me is that they plan to do everything on the straight and narrow. They think, oh, I'll just read the passage very carefully and then I'll understand everything about it and go to the questions. Not necessarily the case. That's one strategy, but there's a few different reading strategies. And frankly, for someone to be adequately prepared, they should go through all of them and have tried them at least a few times before they go on to the test. It's not as straightforward as just, I'm going to read. For example, I got a perfect score and never did I start any time section in the actual test by reading through the full passage and trying to grasp every concept. I was more going to the questions first and seeing things I might need to look at, but we'll go over that. Then identifying your personal weaknesses. People read differently and people are good at different things. Some people are very good at specific quantitative info. There's always going to be questions, referring to statistics you may have seen in the passage. That's some people's forte. Some people's specialty is not that, but big picture, more just understanding different themes that come up repetitively. Some people are just very good with, a very extensive vocabulary, verbiage, so they completely, that's their strong suit. If a question's asking them the meaning of a word in the passage, so everyone has personal strengths and weaknesses, and I'm going to go through a list, and it's just something very good to keep in mind when you're evaluating what you're getting wrong. And, as in anything, as in sports, education, science, including verbal, you want to know your strengths and weaknesses. Then just a few relatively generic bonus tips that helped for me. And the last point, speaks for itself. Ultimately, if I credited getting a perfect on the SAT and I got a perfect on the essay one that existed, it doesn't now, but that skill set is pretty transferable to the verbal section. I can't emphasize enough. I used the same book, which I'll go over at the end as well. And I just did practice test after practice test after practice test in that book. And I got a higher score than the average Harvard freshman. So what students are getting to get admitted into Harvard, not nearly the score I got. And I actually went to Lynbrook High School and Homestead High School, so names that you guys are familiar with. So I did well on the test, and that is amongst peers that are at like the top of the top when it comes to proficiency in all things academia, frankly. So Kala, whenever you're ready, we can go right into the first slide. So first of all, as I had told all of you, context is everything. You will never do well on the SAT verbal tests without understanding the context of every question. That means understanding the point of the passage, the voice of the author, how ideas are being conveyed. You really have to put yourself in the shoes of kind of the passage writer and see. It might not be even ideas you agree with or anything, but that has nothing to do with the matter or the task at hand. So context is very important, how the questions fit in with the passage. And one thing I can't emphasize enough is that the only way to develop this skill of understanding context is to just learn to love to read. I recommend, the New Yorker is a good one. There's a few, I don't think I have the time today to delve into it. There's some authors of classic literature that are, your Hemingway, your Woolfs, your Dumas. They're frequently cited in tests like this, and reading text from such authors and literary greats, as well as scholarly articles, your Wall Street Journal, scientific journals, even books by aforementioned authors I had mentioned, known for complex vocabulary, any type of business journal, anything of that nature is going to help you understand context, because you're going to have to put on a different type of cap and see things through a different lens in all those types of reading. Not only will it help you on your SAT verbal, you'll just learn many new things as well too. So think of it as a win-win. It's not just work for the SAT verbal. You'll also learn about whatever you're reading about. Do not use flashcards. Many of you in this group have probably purchased some. I don't know how, one of the top sellers in verbal test prep, my mistake, fumbling my words a bit. They give zero context. Frankly, you're just reading off flashcards, and it's like, what does Brobdingnagin mean? That's a word, that's a big word for big. An example of an SAT word they might throw at you, Brobdingnagin, it just means large. So you're just reading on one side the word and on the other the definition. It feels satisfying, you know, for the student to say, oh, I went through 100 flashcards, I've learned this many words today. But I cannot emphasize to you enough, and research shows that's just not the way to go. Avoid flashcards at all costs. I'm saving you some time to tell you that right now if you've already purchased some. Again, you need to read and learn new words within stories. When you're forced to look up the definition of a word because you didn't understand it, you're going to then understand it within the context of the story, and that's what the SAT asks you to do. Or within, you know, the example of reading a business journal, it's concepts you can grasp and ponder, which means think about, and that's really how you ingrain and internalize the definition of new words. So avoid flashcards, and just like I had said at the beginning, you're going to have to learn to love to read, and learn to love to read high-level materials, which again will make you a better person in many other ways than just specific to the SAT. So flashcards, not worth it at all, and I would highly recommend to avoid. So different timing strategies that people will use are, first of all, the first take, which is, these have nothing to do with reading strategies. This is assuming you've already grasped the concept of the passage, generally read through it, however specifically works for you, which we'll address later. Some people take their time on each question, which can work if that's for you, but that's one strategy, and then stick with your answer. At that point, you've put enough time towards the 65 minutes that you have to stick with your answer because you've thought the question through so thoroughly. Another way to do it is just, and what kind of worked more for me, is just to answer very swiftly based on intuition, and this will leave you time for a second go around. So it depends what kind of person you are. If you're the type of person who answers are kind of jumping out at you, you're already understanding the concept, you can grasp what's going on within the passage, you feel like the author's voice is speaking to you, or maybe you know, I saw a passage in a practice test the other day specifically from Virginia Woolf. Maybe it's an author you've just happened to have read a lot of. So you can answer quickly at that point, and it might be worth it to just do that. Don't overthink each question was a big thing I did. And then you'll have a second time to go around when you answer swiftly like that. And that's when you can really, double down. So you can either just allow yourself one take per question, which if you're painstaking research-based type of person, work well for you. But either way, you must finish with extra time to be successful. You have to have some kind of amount of time. Even if you're pondering each question thoroughly, you should end up with roughly, at minimum, about 10 minutes at the end of the test to check things through, dot your I's, cross your T's, so to say. You will not be successful if you end each section in the actual test in real time and you're buzzing in the last question at 64 minutes and there's 65 minutes. You're not going to be successful. This is very important. And to this end, take time tests often to see where you stand. I can't emphasize that enough. People just take practice tests to grasp the material, but they don't have a timer handy. Have a timer handy. See how much time you're working with. See how much time you have extra. And that's going to make a huge, you don't need to be that good on the first go around if you're ending with 30 minutes of free time. So that's very important to know. So keep a timer handy and try both of these strategies to just see what works better for you. So now I'm going to go into some ways that the SAT, I believe there's a slide before that about SAT trickery, but essentially the SAT is trying to trick you. Yes, the SAT is designed to trick you, and I can't emphasize that enough. You're never going to get a straightforward answer. it's never going to be so simple as, you're not going to read an article on food shortages and have a question to the effect of, are food shortages bad? Like, it's never going to be a very obvious question. Every question is designed to trick you, and every answer sounds like it could be correct. You're looking for the best answer. Again, I cannot emphasize that enough. Every answer you will ever review on the SAT is a plausible answer. There is no answer you'll see. Once in a while, but very rarely, will you see an answer that is just out of the blue and has nothing to do with anything, and you can eliminate it very easily. They usually try to trick you, and these 4 ways are essentially a repetitive methodology they use to attempt to confuse the reader, kind of weed out people that are more that can really delve to the heart of the matter and see these nuances. And you're going to see this again and again on the test. I can promise you and your student that. So I'm going to go through these 4 types of questions. So 1 is answer choices that are too specific. They contain information that is overly presumptive and inferences that cannot be made from the passage you read. These are answers that are so specific that they will have to do with the passage at hand. I'm going to use an example here. So I had actually a passage that I had worked on a student with about evolution, and there was a main subject question at the end, and it was asking very frank, very straightforward question. You're going to see this often. Which of the following best describes the main subject of the passage? And the first choice was A, the transition between Homo habilis and Neanderthals. So you may be asking, you don't even know what that is. That's the point. No main point of a passage or the main subject matter is going to be described by something that specific. But it appeals to the reader because those are technical terms that were utilized within the passage. You'll recognize them. And so it seems like a plausible answer, but it's way overly specific. And we're going to use that question for all these 4 types of trickery. It was a simple passage on evolution, and without even reading the passage, which none of you, the viewers, have, that's to the point to which the SAT is trying to trick you and how intuitive some of this stuff is. You don't even really need to have read the passage, and you can tell which answer, like how each answer would be incorrect. So again, they're using terms like Homo habilis, Neanderthal, cavemen that came from the passage, but just way too overtly specific, and is just not. Just think to yourself, if you had to make a leap to come to that answer, then it doesn't matter that the answer choice involved words from the passage. It's just too specific, and answers that are too specific are never the correct ones. If you could go to number 2, Kala. So then answer choices, then you have the opposite of that, the antithesis, if you will, which is answer choices that are simply too broad or ambiguous. They lack the specificity to demonstrate that you truly took away the key points the passage was meant to convey. For example, in the case of which of the following describes the main subject of the passage, with the passage being about evolution, B was the study of evolution. It's never going to be that simple. It's technically true. And that's another thing about the SAT. You can get multiple answer choices that are technically true, but you're looking for the best answer. And the best answer is never going to be the study of evolution. There's obviously some further point the author is trying to convey. There's artistic license. There's writing styles. So when you run into a question that just is so broad, it could I'll put it this way. That answer could describe any of 1 million plus articles on evolution. So that's just overtly not going to be the right answer. And you can tell that even without having the passage handy to look at. But if it's too general, same as if it's too specific, that's just another very common way the SAT tries to trick you. And that's never going to be the correct answer. Number 3 is inverse relationship. This is perhaps the most tricky to deal with this answer is tempting because it contains all the right keywords, but the relationship between the words is incorrect, or the antithesis of what you read in the passage. So they will use words very specific to the passage. It's going to jump out at you as a correct answer. But if you were to delve deeper into it, which people don't want to do because they're on a time constraint, so it helps to stay within said time constraint if you know that they're going to do this. So in the case of the evolution passage, answer C was how the environment shaped human evolution. Those are two topics that were mentioned very broadly and very repetitively in the passage. So they're going to jump out at you. It did mention the environment. It did. The whole purpose of it was human evolution. But if you think to yourself how the environment shaped human evolution, the environment didn't shape human evolution, hence climate change, etc. It's flipped around. So it's coming at you with something you're going to recognize, key points that were within the passage, but environment doesn't affect human evolution. Human evolution has had irrevocable effect on the environment. So you really need to watch out for that, because it's going to be concepts that could very well be true, could very well be relevant to the passage, but they've just been inversed and are, you're not going to recognize that unless you delve deep into it. And this is an actual example of how the environment shaped human evolution. That is an actual SAT question used in the past. That was actually an incorrect answer, and the only thing incorrect about it was that the relationship was switched. So you have to be very careful about that, and you should be looking out for that. And then 4 is just the easiest to avoid, but it's utilized again and again. Completely unrelated concept. These answers will also contain buzzwords from the passage, which now, as you notice, all of them will. But it will be unrelated to any actual concrete concept contained within the passage. So the plausibility of evolution was answer choice D in the question, what was the main subject of the passage? It was a passage on evolution and the environment and how the environment has shaped evolution. So it had buzzwords, evolution, plausibility. It sounds good, but that has nothing to do. That is not the purpose of the passage at all. That would be a very specific thing to be on the lookout for. You would know. So that they're going to throw you one answer choice that is just, I don't want to use the word foolish, but these are almost, there's going to be one answer like this in most questions in the SAT that you can just eliminate right away. So it'll just be a concept, an extension that's just completely unrelated, and plausibility had nothing to do with the article. So that's another one to look out for. And yeah, the correct answer to that question, by the way, was E, the influence of human development on ecology. That was the main point of the passage and the correct answer. But you see how all other 4 answers of the 5 possible are also, plausible as correct answers. But again, you're looking for the best answer. And again, I have this slide in here just because I cannot emphasize to you enough the trickery they use and the wrong answer choices you're going to get. These are things that can be developed through coaching. And the more you go through them, you can go with these tips on your own, but having a coach there to tell you just exactly, someone like me who got a perfect on the test, there to tell you exactly where you went wrong and what type to have it into the subset of types of trickery that I've developed and that other proficient tutors use is just very important for your student, and that's how you get that perfect score. Again, can't emphasize enough, all of these type of answer choices will be plausible as answers. None of them will be so ridiculous, except the unrelated concept one, but even that will mention some buzzword from the passage. But you are not going for plausible, you are going for correct. The answer you select needs to be 110% correct, and even one word, as you saw with the inverse relationship example, can alter the answer so as to make it not the correct one. So to that end, either read the question twice when you're first going on it, or make sure you have time for a second go around that comes back to the reading strategies we had discussed. So those are the types of trick questions they're going to use on you in the SAT. And it sounds straightforward as I just said it now, but they're going to come up, and you need someone to be able to point out to you each question you're answering how they try to do that to you. And then through repetition and coaching is how you're going to get that perfect score you desire and have your student, fulfill their potential on the test. Always try to predict the answer before reading the answer choices. This is something I try to do. So like if you just thought to yourself what the passage was about before, the questions are going to confuse you, like I said. So you should, intuition is huge in the SAT. I mean, I finished every single section with extra time, and that was because I usually did this. And usually if you're reading correctly and you've been coached the proper way, you'll be able to just read the question and think to yourself, what was the main point of the passage? Summate that in your own words. And again, you will be surprised at your proficiency in gathering information from the passage. Do not underestimate yourself. The answer choices, you don't need to read them to formulate your own idea of how you could answer that question. And more often than not, when you answer that question in your head and then go through the answer choices, you will be very, very surprised at how you will find one that almost matches what you would have just thought the answer was before even looking at your options. So at times you don't even need to necessarily look at your options, and you'll be surprised at how good you are at dialing in and understanding the question without even looking at the choices. So try that. And then if your guess is, if your answer that you formulated in your head is completely off, no harm done. Just regroup and utilize know that they're going to trick you the ways I told you, and utilize another important strategy I'll go over soon here, and you'll still get to it. But always do try to predict the answer before reading the answer choices, because they're going to start to confuse you, etc. Not bad to come in with the main idea in your head before you even read them. So some passage reading strategies. The one I went before was more answering strategies, because they've assumed you've already read the passage the way you're going to read it. So 3 ways that I've seen students do it differently. Some students read the passage very thoroughly, the same way some students read the question very thoroughly and then answer. Some read the passage very thoroughly, almost, review things they didn't understand the first time, and then answer questions. Another type of student skims the passage very quickly, then reads the questions and reassesses the passage as necessary. Like if they feel they can answer it that's my preferred method. I read the passage very quickly. I'm a relatively quick reader, high words per minute. I just try to read the passage quickly. I usually am pretty good, which comes through practice, at grasping the general concepts just from doing that. And then I just read the questions and I go back to the passage as necessary. If you've taken a long time to read the passage thoroughly, you're not going to necessarily have time to do that. You're going to have to answer the questions as they come at that point. So both strategies work for different people. You should try them each. The third is people who read the questions first, actually, they don't even read the passage before. And I've seen this work for people, but not necessarily the best one for me, but it's worth a try. You should try all these reading strategies before you take the test in reality. If you were playing baseball and there's 3 different ways to hit a ball, you would want to learn all of them before you actually were up at bat in real life, getting a pitch thrown to you. So some people read the questions first and then mark the passage. So, if you get asked a very specific question pertaining to the passage, you can then search for where that answer is. So it's kind of the opposite. Instead of coming into the question loaded with info from the passage and kind of having a framework to work from, you're just reading the question and trying to find them in the passage. As I had said, all of these strategies come with pitfalls. Reading thoroughly spends time on details unrelated to questions, because there's only so many questions to the passage, and not everything you're reading in the passage are you going to be asked about. And you're not reading these passages for fun or to just understand them to talk about with your friends later. So the pitfall to strategy 1 would be that you're going to read very thoroughly, and time towards that 65 minutes is going to be spent on details unrelated to any questions you're going to see. That's inevitable if you're going through a thorough first read through. Now, skimming quickly necessitates going back for review. That's an obvious pitfall, but that's one I frankly, and many students I've had success with, are willing to go through, because the time you save by not reading it overly thoroughly, and it's kind of a mix of 1 and 3 when you do that. You're not reading the questions first, but you have more time to read them and go back in the passage because you didn't spend so much time reading the passage in the first place. You're not soaking up unnecessarily details, but it is going to necessitate you then go back. Yeah, like, so for example, in the evolution one I was talking about, if you were to read the whole passage very thoroughly, then answer the questions, not all of it was related to ecology. There was background on like nomenclature of specific evolutionary stages of humanity, etc. These are things you wouldn't have needed to know for any of the questions. And so you're going to get stuck with all these technical terms like Homo sapiens, nobilis, this, and you will have spent time reading that when you read the passage thoroughly to begin with. And no question is going to be asked about that. So that's a pitfall of reading it very thoroughly. If you skim it quickly, you're going to get asked about, again, there's always so often, there's going to be quantitative questions on there. So if you skim the passage quickly, any specific question, like something about a number you read in the passage or an example that was utilized, you're not going to remember that from a quick skim through. So you're going to have to go back to the passage if you utilize strategy 2, and then strategy 3, read the question first and mark the passage. It just doesn't allow you to fully digest the answer choices because you have no context to them. I mean, that one, there's not really a specific example I can use. That's just more of a general concept. If you have not even read what you're going to be answering on, you're not going to have read you're reading the questions, you're reading the answer choices essentially with no frame of reference, and you're going back for that frame of reference. But again, that works for some people. The only way to figure out just try all 3 of these, and you'll find your own specific examples, and you'll see which works best for you. It will be apparent very quickly. Number 1 and 2. Number 3 is for the brave. I'm sure someone has gotten a perfect score before doing number 3, but it is kind of a brave thing to do because you're going into those answer choices with no context, and you're really relying on yourself to be able to find very specifically in the passage and mark up where you'll find them. So again, experiment and find which methodology is best for you. That should take less than a week to do. You're doing practice tests again and again. It'll make itself apparent very quickly which is the best strategy for you as an individual. Analyze every mistake you make thoroughly, or you are doomed to repeat the same mistakes. Are you making careless errors? I have found myself guilty of that when I was going through practice tests, where it's really when you reread the question, when you reread a question you got wrong, and you just think to yourself, oh man, how could I have missed that? It was so clear she was speaking about ecology the whole time. How could I have thought this? Or you fall for that type of trickery I mentioned earlier, where you see the buzzwords and you answer how the environment affects human evolution, and it just, you went for those buzzwords and you just didn't read it through thoroughly enough. So that's one example. Are you not understanding the main concepts? Are you having a problem grasping what the author is trying to convey? Are you simply not understanding the words? These are like typical. And yeah, for the audience member that asked for some specific examples, if I delve too deep into those, we would be here all day. These are general forms of trickery. The specific examples are what you're getting when you have a tutor or a coach or a Harmony Plus language expert go take you through the test. I'm just telling you generally the pitfalls you're going to fall into. Lack of vocabulary is a big one. If you just don't understand what the word ecology means, you're not going to get that question right, period. So figure out what it is that what your shortcoming is, figure it out what is holding you back and focus on that. So here are some specific examples of weaknesses, there you go, that I see in students. Some students are very good with details, fail to understand the big picture and the main point of the passage. They're very good with remembering numbers that were thrown at them They're very good with remembering a statistic that was cited. They're very good with remembering like a poignant moment the author had mentioned. Maybe, sometimes in a passage, like a scene will be described vividly, like the ocean waves were cold upon her skin as sunlight caressed her hair, things of that nature. Some people are good at remembering those small details, but very bad at taking away the big picture and the main point. And these are things that can be coached specifically too. And that really being tutored or coached is the only way to figure out these areas of weakness, because you're really taking the SAT verbal as a one-time thing. You want your verbal skills to shine so that you can get into the college of your dreams. But the people you'll be working with are people who didn't just do it for college. They majored in high grade universities, at the Columbias, at the NYUs, at Stanford, et cetera, in English. And that's who, the type of person you want you're evaluating your child and telling them which of these mistakes they're making. Then there's little picture / detail, opposite of what I had mentioned. Some people are very good at grasping the main point of the passage, that it's about humans' impact on nature, if you will, in the evolution example, but they're not good at remembering small examples or numbers that were thrown at them, quantitative information. Some people are bad at inference. They only understand answers that were very directly provided to them. They're not good. This is a huge one I see with students. They're not good at then going in and they basically making a leap past the answer. Some answers are just going to be such that you have to make your own inference from the passage. They're not laying out the answer for you, something that was very specific. You're going to have to think for yourself. Words and phrases in context. So lighting a cigar and lighting on a movie set are two very different things, but the word lighting remains constant. Some people are very surprisingly, it sounds obvious as I say it right now, when you have a 65-minute time crunch on you and so many questions to go through with a variety of passages, some people really don't see that context. They won't tell the difference between lighting Winston Churchill's cigar during World War II and the lighting on a movie set. And so they're bad at understanding words and phrases in context, something that can be trained to do. Citing textual evidence. Some people are good at understanding concepts, but they're very bad at like figuring out where in the passage evidence for that was put forth. Some people are bad at understanding perspective. Every author comes with their own perspective. Some people write in an existential style, like, you have your Camus, other classic authors, they write an existential style. Some people rely on imagery, so understanding the perspective and what the author relies on, very important. Some people are bad at analyzing word choice, bad at analyzing multiple texts. There's going to be questions where you're asked to compare and contrast passages. There's also questions where there's like, when it comes to quantitative info, there's questions where there's going to be graphs, pie charts, things of that nature. And some people are just flat out not good at reading those. So it's good to have a list like this in front of you of places you can stumble, so that when you do stumble, you can pinpoint, because you don't want to just know, oh, I got 5 questions wrong when I did this practice test. You want to know why you were getting those questions wrong. Was I getting the questions specifically that asked about the main point wrong? Was I getting questions that asked me to analyze statistics and make an inference wrong? So that's a 2-for-1. And many questions will actually require multiple of these. So, which are you weak at? Figure it out through doing practice tests, having the right coach, and then go to work on that quite specifically. Focus on your weaknesses. Don't just focus on how many questions you got wrong. Focus on how you're getting them wrong and what you're repeatedly stumbling over as you take these tests. Another thing, when you are reading, again, this seems very obvious, not the hugest tip in the book, but it's a freebie. There is many students I taught did not even bother to read this. When you're looking at an SAT passage, you're going to see the small italicized passage introduction before it. It's going to be a couple sentences above the long passage. Look out for it. It's in italics. It's in very small font, and it's I can't tell you what it will be every time. Sometimes it's something about the author's life, which could be important later, because let's say that author grew up in the Great Depression, and then you're reading an article on needs and wants. It's going to help a lot to understand that the author didn't grow up with much before they wrote that passage. Just having that insight is going to, as a small example, but there's always going to be a small italicized small font passage introduction before the main passage. Always read it. Though short and not dense in information, it provides free context. You will get something from it, and it's free. Take what you are given for free. Do not glance over that. Many people don't even, just don't even look at that and go straight into reading the passage. Always read that. Always read that small little part in italics and see what context it can give you for free before you've even started the passage. It's a freebie. Take it. It will help you when reading the passage. Bonus tip, never bubble in your answer choices as you go. Always circle your answer in the booklet and fill out the bubbles when you have finished. This will always save you time without exception. This is just me speaking from experience. I got a perfect score. You want your child to get a perfect score. I did this. I don't think I've ever had a student I've tutored not improve their score by at least 150 plus points. To be frank, I would have to go back in my references, but I feel I can confidently say that. And I have told this to every student, and every student has employed this. Do not sit there and bubble each answer. Circle it in the booklet. If you see B is the answer to question 1, circle B. You can go through later and bubble in each one, and that is just the way to do it. And then that forces you to reread the questions as well, kind of as you're bubbling. So you might get through any hiccups just right then. So never bubble in as you go. And finally, can't emphasize this enough, practice, practice, practice. I did hundreds, literally. I had a study hour at my school. I went to Lynbrook High School. Many of you are probably familiar with it. It's on the border of Cupertino and San Jose, one of the best schools in the nation. We had a study hour at school, and all I would do during that study hour is not just verbal tests. I also took practice math tests, etc. But I took hundreds of practice verbal tests before I took the SAT. And that's where I found the nuance to understand some of these common ways they use to trick you, etc. Like, I did so many of these practice tests, I can't even emphasize. I personally used the question I get a lot. I did not use any book above. I read books that I searched online were known. I have a list of those separately. Not going to go over that today, but I do have a list of just books I recommend to students that are just have the types of words that pop up often on the SAT. Some of those scholarly journals, etc. I was telling you about, but all I used mainly was the College Blue Board book. And, that just has past SATs. You fill out the bubbles, you check your answers in the back, and it has a pretty well thought out explanation of how you got each one wrong. So, if you want to shoot a 3-pointer well, you're going to have to shoot 1,000 of them. That's what I did when it came to the SAT verbal. Now, where I did this alone, but if you want your student to actually have the best chance to succeed, you want a coach with them as they do this practice, someone who specialized specifically in verbal and language at a top university, someone who majored in that, someone with a master's in literature, that type of thing. And they're going to be able to take the student to the next level with that practice. Because if you're practicing but with the wrong form, you're gonna improve just from practice, but not as drastically as you want. And frankly, as SAT scores get more competitive, you're going to need a coach or a very proficient tutor as you do these practice tests. So.
Okay, and we have another question. So where can you get those verbal practice tests?
Those verbal practice, as I said, College Board Blue Book. It's still around. I believe, I'm going to try right now. If you Google it, the College Board Blue comes up right away. Yeah, it's the official one. The official College Board SAT Blue Book. You Google it, it's $20 or less. That's all I did my practice tests out of. But again, you want coaching with that, but that's where I got the practice tests I used, and that's what got me a perfect score. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to field them also. Whenever you believe it's a good time, call it.
Sure, maybe we can first talk about how Harmony Plus can help everyone, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So we have quite a few questions for when people registered, but then other people can feel free to add their questions, especially in that Q&A section, because then we can let you know when we're answering your question. Okay, but first I'll just quickly let you guys know how Harmony Plus can help. So we can help students in a variety of areas. One area would be GPA and academic performance. Then of course, test prep, as Luckman was discussing today. We also have many extracurricular activities and research and leadership opportunities for students as well. That'll really help enhance students' resumes and also give them something to write about in their college essays, which we also have coaching for. We help advise students with recommendations and also help them prep for interviews. So basically all the different aspects of the college application process we can definitely help with. So one service that we have would be tutoring. Okay, so SAT and ACT for one. So if you'd like to work with Luckman or another one of our tutors, definitely feel free to scan the QR code to learn more and get in touch with us. We have a wide variety of subjects, also reading and writing. So if students just need some academic support in that area. And then more specifically, we do have a specialized speed reading program. So a lot of students have really been able to improve their reading with that program. Math, all levels, chemistry is another really popular one that a lot of students sign up for, and then many other subjects as well. So we have many professional tutors, so definitely let us know if you need tutoring by scanning that QR code. Okay, and then just a little bit about our future planning services. So we call this moonshot education because we want to help students, reach the moon. So here are some of the services that we provide. So we help advise students on private middle school and high school applications. For students who are not in their application year, we provide academic and extracurricular enhancement services, including helping plan for the SAT. Then for students who are in their application year, whether they're grade 12 students applying to college to be freshmen, or students who want to transfer or even do grad school applications, we do all sorts of those packages. We also have one-on-one essay editing and interview training for people who prefer just focusing on those areas as well instead of the full package. Okay, so maybe you guys are wondering, what is this academic and extracurricular enhancement? Well, when students are not in their application year, the main service objective is to help students build a personalized, competitive application profile. So we do this by the following. So we normally have 10 meetings a year. We have major and career assessment for students to complete, academic evaluations, school course selection. We give test prep advice, help students plan for that. We help students also plan their extracurriculars, including that summer planning. We help students prepare their resumes, research colleges, and also plan on going to those colleges and other personalized services. So this is a very individualized service. Then we also help students do applications, of course. So we can do undergrad applications, transfer, and grad school. So the main objective here is to help package and present students in the best light possible to colleges. So here are some ways in which we do this. Okay, so we're kind of flexible about the number of schools. It just kind of depends on what the students' needs are, and then we can work accordingly. Meetings with the coach and consultant are as necessary, so we're pretty flexible about that. We help with application profile strategy, major selection, college list development, essay brainstorming and writing instruction, early application strategy, application interview preparation, helping students make a plan to tour colleges, devising a strategy if students are deferred or waitlisted. We can also help with that final college selection and other pre-college and personalized services. So again, very individualized. Okay, and then we have the one-on-one essay editing and interview training, and also students need to do a video supplement. So basically with this, we go through a whole process of brainstorming, outlining, and writing. We also have interview training sessions, and then we do a mock interview. And for students who do need to do that video supplement, we can help edit a script and do the video editing as well. Then we always make detailed plans like this so that everyone is really on the same page of when we're having meetings, when essays or certain tasks are due, and we like to stay really organized so that everything can be on track. Okay, so that's a bit about our future planning service and our tutoring services. So if you want to learn more, definitely feel free to join our WeChat group by scanning this QR code. Okay, and then just a special promotion. So we're definitely looking to get more Google reviews. So if you review Harmony Plus on Google, you can receive a $50 coupon for any Harmony Plus service or program. So definitely feel free to scan this QR code and then follow the instructions so that you can write a review, take a picture, and then get that coupon. Okay, so anyway, I'm sure that you guys have a lot of questions. Let's go to the Q&A with Luckman. And I see that we have another question here. Okay, so I guess this one's a little bit more about application essays. So maybe I could just answer this one. Oh, sorry, what, Luckman?
I had seen that one, and I was going to say, I actually think I did very well on my application essay, but I don't know any resources. Mine was good enough to get me into every UC, as well as Northwestern University and Boston University. But I can't answer that. That would be more for someone who specializes in that. G Fang, I saw you had asked about any book that I recommend for SAT Word. There was actually a book series, I believe also through the College Board. I can send you an email or something, but I have a good list of SAT books that I'll, maybe call, tell you about, send through an email. As for the application, it was a series that very specifically had short stories. Like I remember one about poker, but they purposefully would insert SAT words where regular words would be and then force you. So kind of a choose your own adventure thing, but with SAT words. I will find the name of that, G Fang. I will not forget you, and I'll get to that. As for any question about college application essays, that is Kala's specialty. So I think she should answer that, not me.
Yeah, no problem. I don't want to steal the thunder away from talking about test prep today, but for writing the first draft of application essays, yeah, usually it's good to start writing those drafts before that August release. So for the Common App main essays, we do have the new topics for this year. So compared to last year, there's just one prompt that's different. That'd be prompt number 4, and that one is about gratitude. So actually, we just had a webinar about college essays on July 10th. So if you want to check out our YouTube channel or our Facebook page, then you can see that webinar, and then there are many very detailed tips about that. So thanks for asking. But at this point, I think that we can switch to talking about test prep. Okay, so Luckman, we have another question. Any tips for the PSAT?
So the tips for the PSAT are the exact same as the tips for the SAT. The PSAT is just, I believe just a shorthand version of the SAT. It's meant to mimic it. There's nothing that I said that would change from the SAT to the PSAT. My tips would be to take a lot of PSATs, read books with good with good verbiage you could pick up, check, look out for those same types of trickery. Have a coach there to see what your students' weaknesses are and help them with it. No change in preparing for the SAT to preparing for the PSAT.
Okay, and then we have another question. How do you prepare for questions about passages in the form of poems?
By reading poems and taking practice tests where the passages are related to poems, and figuring out what about poems you're having a problem with. Are you not understanding the words in the poem? They use a lot of Old English style vocabulary in poems. Are you not understanding the point of the poems? Poems are the questions that you get asked on poems are very inference based. They're never going to be straightforward. They're going to ask you what you took away from the poem. So really just take the same strategies you would for the SAT and apply them to poems. But especially focus on author voice and inference. When it comes to inference is one of the weaknesses I find in students. The best way to prepare for poems is to read a few and just take a step out of your comfort zone when you're answering the question, and understand that the answer to questions about poems are going to be based on author voice, messaging, and things of that nature. So, and there's a lot of the tutors at Harmony Plus like specialized in things like poetry and learned, like, I would imagine, right, Carla, some of the tutors we work with, like, that was like their forte. That's what they wrote theses on for graduate school. So, get the right coach and work on inference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then we can also answer some questions that people wrote before the webinar. So we have one question, how to increase from a score of about 1520 to 1580 plus on the SAT. Any advice?
So a lot of these questions are like, that's essentially just asking, how can I get a better score? 1520, very high. At that point, it's like you can lose 60 points on a matter of like 4 questions, I believe. So at that point, I believe timing strategies might be something to focus on. Doing a third run through. Carla, do you have any ideas?
I'm sorry, for what?
For the question regarding the 1520 to 1580, I would think is a timing issue. The score is already so high that you're probably making a few careless errors that you could just cut out. If you were to just time yourself better and make sure you have the opportunity to do a second run through on the test, because you can lose 60 points in a matter of, those first points you lose are very easy. Missing one question is a deduction of 10 points, I believe. So at that point, just, try to work on your specifics, read more, work on timing, but you clearly have a relatively solid blueprint.
Sure, thanks. Okay, and then we have a quick question, which grade to take the PSAT? So basically, many students in 10th grade are able to take this at their school, but it won't count for that National Merit Scholarship until students are in 11th grade. So in 10th grade, that's purely practice. In 11th grade, that's also practice. There are no penalties for how well you do on it or not, but it can be used for that National Merit Scholarship just in 11th grade.
I will say in Cupertino, where I grew up, I went to Miller Middle School, probably a very familiar name to many of the participants. We actually took PSATs in 7th grade at Miller Middle School. So 11th grade.
Okay.
I took a PSAT in 7th grade and then didn't even think about the SAT again until I took it in 11th grade. But if you want your child to have a general understanding, middle school, again, in these competitive markets that I've tutored in, and at Miller Middle School, a name I know a lot of people here are going to recognize that feeds into Lynbrook, we did the PSAT in 7th grade. So never too early to get started.
Sure, thanks for those insights. Wow, middle school is pretty early. Okay, so just a few more questions that people asked before the webinar. So I think a lot of the questions were covered, to be honest, but one would be how to combine SAT preparation with regular studying together. So it's kind of hard for students to balance like regular studying with their SAT prep, right? How do you find time? How do you balance?
So that just comes down to time management. That's a good question, actually. You just have to plan your time very efficiently. Set a time where you're just maybe 2 days a week focus on SAT, and then as the test nears, increase that. I would always advise a student to focus on their regular studies first, but just start off with like a soft time you've set aside. Cut into that Facebook and video game time. Honestly, that's a big problem I've seen with my students. Cut into that computer game time. There's always enough time. You just need to cut out some of those more unhealthy habits and learn to enjoy it actually, and then it won't even feel like a chore, and it won't even feel like a balance. So you could be reading a book about something that you like, but if it's a high level book, you're still studying for that SAT verbal. So try to make it as enjoyable as possible. Find a relaxing setting, kick up with a nice book, and start off there. That's true what they said. There's already so many pressures in regular school. So start off with easy on the SAT prep, and then just increase. Or then, I mean, the benefit of a tutor or program again is that then you're not going to have to think about how to find a balance. You're just going to be. That's why people sign up for programs, is because then it's just straightforward. It's a forced commitment. You're going to go in, and when you pay for things, it makes your improvement. It makes you almost feel the need to improve because you paid for it. So, for example, I bought a very expensive running shoes, and now I'm going to go on a run later because I don't want those running shoes to go to waste. So just enroll in a program that forces you to study SAT, like one of the ones Harmony Plus offers.
Yeah, thanks, Luckman. Okay, and then I see that it is just about time for us to wrap things up. So last question, approximately how long would it take to raise my reading score by 50 to 100 points if I study 30 minutes a day?
I actually have kind of a direct answer to that one. 50 to 100 points, 30 minutes a day. 3 months, if you're doing nothing but just studying 30 minutes a day. If you have the proper coach or someone that's just demonstrated an ability to get a perfect score or has focused on English their whole life, then 1 month. You can boost. I have personally boosted someone's score 50 to 100 points or more even in a month to 2 months, just with proper coaching. So depends on you. If you just blanketly study, 3 months. And G Fang, I got your email. I will absolutely send you something.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Luckman, for all the insights about the SAT, and thank you to all of the attendees for coming today. So we'll just kind of wrap things up because it's a little bit after 6 o'clock right now. So thank you guys so much. Feel free to contact us, WeChat, social media, phone, email, whatever way you like best. So I really appreciate all of you guys being here, and we hope that you have a wonderful evening.